Well, now we come to the final lecture of the semester, and here we're going to take a look at David Foster Wallace's The Pale King. Throughout the semester, I've gone back and forth between what I call a macro-political or macro-historical account of human life and a micro-political or micro-historical account. And let me just remind you of what I mean by those two terms. At the macro level, if you take a step back and you look at the world from 30,000 feet, you see kind of a change that takes place through a society, through a regime, through a country, through a political community. And you do your best to try to identify the trajectory of that regime. You can't do it perfectly because here you're talking about hundreds of millions of souls moving through space and time. But the project of macro-political study and macro-historical study is important because if we know where we've come from and we know where we are, we'll better know where we're going and how we can get to a better place. But we can't forget that life is not simply lived at the macro-political or macro-historical level. It's also lived at the micro level. It's lived between 5 and 6 feet, where our eyes are looking at the world, where our heart suffers, where we have our challenges and our doubts. And I think it's here we'll end with Wallace's The Pale King, because we'll get to see, well, what does our mind and our heart think and feel about the world in the 21st century? It's not to say that everyone thinks and feels about the world in this way, but I think what the great authors do is they come to grips with where humanity is at any given moment. Wallace was a great fan of the Russian author Fyodor Dostoevsky. Well, why? Well, because his concern, Wallace writes, and writing on Dostoevsky, was always with what it is to be a human being, what it is to be an actual person whose life is informed by values and principles, instead of just an especially shrewd kind of self-preserving animal. Well, The Pale King, tragically, was pulled together by Wallace's editor after Wallace took his own life. Now, I signed 2 chapters of this work. The first chapter, chapter 19, I think, gives you a sense as to what the problem is. Here you have a variety of different people having a conversation. You really don't know who the actors are, but they're hitting upon something. What troubles American society? What are we doing wrong? And various answers are given as to what troubles our society. Is the problem a problem of capitalism? Is the problem a problem of corporations? Or is the government to blame? Or do we, the people, should we take some blame for where we are as a society? Well, you get to the end of the chapter and one of the actors says the following. The problem is a problem that's spiritual. The problem is our belief, here to quote Wallace, that I, the individual, am so small and the mass of everyone else is so big. What possible difference does what I do make? We are like leaves that no longer belong to a tree. So if that's the problem, the question is, well, how do we draw together American society once again? And this is one of the great ironies of Wallace's The Pale King. The book really has no beginning, middle, and end. You get about a third through it and you realize what? Well, all the stories that you've read up until that point deal with individuals that end up in an IRS office in Peoria, Illinois. Now that's kind of interesting, right? Peoria, Illinois. Do you dream of ending up in Peoria, Illinois? Do you dream of being an IRS agent? No, probably not. These aren't things that human beings tend to dream of. But what do we learn about an IRS office in Peoria, Illinois? We learn something very important about the mindset that it's going to take to overcome the challenges that we face as a society. Here in the second chapter that I referenced for you, chapter 23, Wallace tells the story of a young man who believes that everyone around him is wrong because they believe that their individual lives matter. He has a Christian roommate who has a girlfriend, and she believes that she's been called by God to be a Christian. And he just believes that this kind of idea that we all matter is stupid. And instead, what this character does is he spends a lot of his time watching TV and soap operas. There was once a soap opera called As the World Turns. And the commercial went something like this: "You're watching As the World Turns." And he finally realized one day, I am watching as the world turns. I criticize everyone else, but I fail to act. And he learns to act when he mistakenly goes into an accounting class and an adjunct account professor says the following: "To be an accountant is to do something heroic. Ladies and gentlemen, you are called to account." You see, what makes an IRS life a good life, a heroic life, is every detail counts. The lesson, I think, for us, we're not going to make our way probably into a history book. But do we think, therefore, that our lives don't matter, that they don't count? We need not only account for the choices that we make, but we want to be a part of the choices that our society is going to make. My hope for you in this course, American Civilization and Culture, is that you will call to account not only your own life, but to become part of our national life. Thank you.